light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. I think if it were up to me, I would live in a world that did not use money and that was instead founded on the basic principle of love one another. Because if everyone loved one another, everything else would fall into place. And if the first rule of existence was love one another, and mostly it was the question of spending our lives learning what that meant and not having any other need for one, I guess, any political system would work, any economic system would work, and we may not even need either one. My preference would be to live in a world without money because of, the oft-quoted biblical verse, the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money itself, but the love of money. But the living within an economically obsessed age, that's basically the love of money. And then if you go beyond a certain point, it even becomes, for example, an addiction to gambling, hence Gamblers Anonymous. But if you go back to instead start with love one another, then it's not a question of whether they have enough money. It's a question of getting them the help they need, and we'll find some way to cover it. If we need to have corporate sponsorships of hospitals in order for all the medical care to be given to all the people who need it, then we could do that. If it's a question of going back to barter in many more things, that I need this and you need that, so we'll exchange and we won't worry about charging each other, because it's never made sense to me anyway that someone is paid more and someone is paid less, because I've seen firsthand the enormous number of hours that farmers put into growing food. And it doesn't make sense to me that they're somewhere way down here in terms of how many hours they have to spend in order to have the money to pay for only 1 hour of the time of an attorney or a doctor or something like that. Food is every bit as essential as anything that any of those people can provide. It's not a question of who needs what more, it's a question of all things being needed. Within my experiences in the world of theater, the phrase that I think was attributed to Stanislavski, a man who created a lot of the fundamental ideas of how theater is done. I think he was the one who said, there are no small parts, only small players, suggesting, or pointing out, rather, that every single part in a play has to be there on cue, no matter how many or how few lines the part has to say. Even if the part doesn't have any lines, everything has to be exactly right, or the play falls flat and stumbles because something wasn't there that needed to be. So it's not that the small part, which is measured as small by having fewer lines or having fewer actions within the play, it's not that it's less important, it's just that it has less to do, but it's still every bit as important and has to be done correctly and perfectly, or it becomes a gaping hole in the play. Reminds me of a community theater play I was in once, where I was saying a line and this particular man was supposed to interrupt me with his entrance, and I couldn't quite think of what to say, and I kept stumbling and trying to repeat, and wasn't sure what to say next, and wasn't sure how to make something up or what I would say if he never did enter when on his cue. And so finally one of the other persons on stage looked toward the wings and said, and yelled the guy's name and said, "Is that you?" And then of course he knew he was late and he stumbled on and we resumed the play. But it was falling flat because he wasn't there on cue, even though his was not a small part, it was a smaller part, but it's not it's not in terms of importance. It's in terms of, all the roles were equal. It's which is how I tend to see the world. It's a very egalitarian situation. that this person needs to be there and that person needs to be there and the food needs to be there and the medical care needs to be there and the mail has to be delivered and the car has to be fixed. All these are equally important. And so I would have no objection to everyone being paid the same. But it's still a question of whether someone has enough money to pay for whatever the service is that's needed. If the car repair is this many hundreds or thousands of dollars and the food only costs, this many hundreds of dollars, there will be an equity where suddenly the farmer won't be able to cultivate the food because the tractor stopped working and the mechanic wouldn't come to fix it because the farmer didn't have enough money. And so the whole system begins to break down. Somehow we need to, and the added challenge to the current age is that things are becoming more and more mechanized and computerized. And at some point, there will not be enough jobs to go around. The machines will be doing them and we'll have lots of people to maintain the machines, but all the factory workers and line workers and so forth may be unemployed because we don't need that many people to run the factory anymore. And so in that, with the opportunity and the invitation to humanity in that situation, is to begin to orient life back to our relationships and not so much on our work and our jobs. At one point in time, somebody wasn't supported because they earned it. They were supported because they were family. The elderly would do what they could, but if they couldn't do that much anymore, there were still people who loved them enough to say, I don't care if you can earn your way or not. I'm going to support you because I want you here. There was affirming that within an episode of Queer as Folk, I think it was. There's a woman who is working in a restaurant supporting her brother who is dying of AIDS and her son who is come out as gay but is trying to get his career started. But this is a discussion between the brother and the sister who's supporting him. And he doesn't like that she has to support him. And he doesn't like that he's battling AIDS all the time and can't hold down a job because he doesn't have the energy and ability that he once did. And she says, with AIDS, without AIDS, with money, without money, you're my brother and I want you here. Your family. She didn't care about the money, she cared about the relationship. There was a time in tribal societies where it wasn't about the money, it was about the relationship. It was about having grandma and grandpa and the elders of the tribe because they were the carriers of knowledge and experience and memories and wisdom. They knew what had happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, how a particular problem was managed. They knew maybe there hadn't been a flood in 25 years, but suddenly there was a flood, and the elders of the tribe knew what to do. The young people of the tribe didn't know what to do because they had never faced this before. It was something totally new to them. And so as we move through a world that has to move away from defining people by their jobs, because there simply aren't enough jobs to go around anymore, the machines are doing too many of them, and instead of saying that all the poor people should just die, or maybe we should line them up and shoot them all. No. Everyone matters, every life matters, every person could be the one who remembers and knows how to make a difference in facing a future challenge that has never been faced before or that hasn't been faced recently enough for anyone to know what to do. We have all this technology, we build a super advanced society. In the novel that I wrote, actually, it was something that came to me as an intuitive inspiration, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and I wrote it all down. And then finally in the year 2000, I was able to get it published. It refers to a mythical world that I created for the sake of the book that existed in my imagination, in which it was a world that had become very advanced. They had technology, they had super advanced everything. Everything was so far in the future. It was all electronic and technological and everything was wonderful. But the problem was that the one thing they never resolved was how to deal with the problem of good and evil. And so whenever they found someone doing something bad, they just picked them up and took them over there and dropped them in this hole, this big canyon that was so deep no one could see the bottom, and kind of like they were throwing away their defective people. And what they didn't realize is that the people that kept dropping into this hole weren't dying. And over hundreds of years, the population down there grew so much that it finally became an army like Attila the Hun, these overwhelming army that came up and swept across the land, destroying everything in its path because of how angry they were at having been thrown away. And so the entire world in that story was thrown back to essentially a medieval level of technology and has to regrow itself all over again and gradually start marching forward, which the story isn't long enough to show all of that progression happening all over again, but it was essentially that they were advanced, they were thrown back to a medieval level of technology, and we're trying to find ways to again grow and learn and move forward, and how complicated that was, and how it was happening for the land as a whole, but it was also happening within the individual lives of people. And what they had to learn essentially was how to do relationship in an unconditionally loving fashion, an unconditionally loving manner. That it wasn't just about the money, it was about the relationship. It was about knowing themselves, knowing each other, and learning how to effectively and truly and unconditionally love each other. And that's just, in a way, that's kind of what we're facing within the current time. I almost started to say we may not have been thrown back to a medieval level of development, but that's not entirely true, because there have been places in the world where, because of tsunamis and hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and so forth, all of the technology was destroyed. And in some cases, other countries and other people were willing to step in and start bringing things back up more quickly. And in some cases, they're still living in the Stone Age because they don't have the technology, and they don't have the money, and they don't have anything except their relationships. But it's the relationships that allow them to survive at all. It's recognizing that on some level, we're all family. It's not just that mother and father, and these are the children, and the grandparents, and so on. But it's, in many cases now we have single parent families. We have families that have no children. And and people who are wrestling with the mental illness of narcissism, thinking that the entire universe revolves around them, and spending whatever resources they have on their own life experience in ways that are so selfish that when they do finally die, they have done nothing to make the world a better place. And again and again, I keep saying, it's not my money, it's not your money, it's the world's money. And the world will keep it. Like a Monopoly game from years ago, when the game ends, the money stays with the game. You don't get to keep it. You don't get to spend it anywhere else. You don't even get to keep any of the houses or hotels that you accumulated during the playing of the game. It all belongs to the game. You don't get to keep any of it. The only purpose that money serves is so that you can demonstrate how much more good you can do than someone else. It's only a question of demonstrating your abilities and the way you think and the things you value, the people you value. That's where, and that's where in my teenage years, when I would sometimes play Monopoly with some other friends at the time, we got to where we didn't want the game to end. And so when somebody was about to go out of the game, we decided, because there was nothing in the rules that said you couldn't do it, we decided that it was possible to make a donation to another player if we wanted to. And so it would get to a certain point in the game where somebody was losing funds and about to go out of the game, and when it became somebody's turn, they would instead say, as part of my turn, I'm going to make a donation of this much money to this person because I can see that they need it, and I don't. And so the game would go on longer, and we get to keep playing and enjoying each other's company that much longer by being generous. The quirk I found sometimes is that there are people who want to be known of as being generous without ever giving anything away. And that's kind of like saying that you want to be known as the world's best swimmer without ever getting into the water. It's kind of a contradiction that's impossible. If you want to be a generous person, you have to give something away. If you want to be the world's best swimmer, you're going to have to at least get in the water. But again, it's not about having the most, or he who dies with the most toys wins. Wins what? You don't win anything because the money stays with the game. If you can instead demonstrate, your ability to do good with the sources that come into your hands, and if you leave the world a better place than it was when you arrived, you could be the next Leonardo da Vinci or William Shakespeare, or somebody whose name will be spoken with honor and reverence for hundreds of years to come, because you did leave the world a better place than you found it. And it wasn't just about following all the rules, it was about creating a better reality upon which the future generations' rules would be written. That before any of the rules could even enter somebody's mind, you create a world that is so filled with love and goodness that better rules have to be written than the ones with which the current generation is living. Moving toward a world without money means learning how to love one another, means learning how to be generous, means learning how to live frugally and not be so self-indulgent that you have less to give, but living in a way that is frugal and efficient and gives you everything you need to do the work that you want to do, everything that your heart most wants to create, whether it's designing a better automobile, whether it's painting a better picture, whether it's creating music that will stir and inspire people's hearts. That, well, to do that I need a piano, I need paper, I need a pen, I need a place to put my piano, I need a house that is so sufficiently well insulated that the piano lasts a long time. It isn't subjected to hot and cold temperatures so often that it ruins the piano. There are certain things that you need to do the creative work that is in your heart to do. Having secured those in a way that is durable and manageable and doesn't have to be replaced every year, that means that you can then begin to find everyone else who is still trying to do the same. And you can build houses that are so energy efficient that those persons' money can go more toward helping others rather than just paying the power company to continually heat something that is not well insulated, and essentially it's like you're trying to heat the outdoors during the winter. So, the one example I can think of was in the movie version of Les Miserables, where having been in prison, having come out, having had to lie basically about who and what he was, and yet created this factory that is so wonderfully profitable and everything, and yet knowing that the people who were looking for him way back when are coming after him, he draws up this legal document so that before they can get to him, the factory is deeded to the workers, and it is now their factory. They own it and they run it, and it's up to them to carry on. But when the person is looking for where does this man live, and he's the factory owner and the mayor of the town and everything else, and it is this very humble little house, not some big palace, and they're quite surprised. Why would he live in something like this when he could afford so much more? Well, because he was putting all that money aside in a way that it would benefit all the workers of the factory, so that people would not be forced to make the horrendous decisions of the character Fantine within that story, of having to sell her hair and sell her teeth and make herself a prostitute and everything just so that she would have money to pay for her daughter who is growing up in a foster situation. To make every imaginable sacrifice in order to give everything to her daughter. So instead of letting that be the norm, this man spends his life creating a world in which no one would ever have to make the choices that she had to make. And in the similar sort of way, when we ground our lives in unconditional love and create a world in which people can get their needs met at a modest level, and it used to be said that modesty is a virtue. I haven't heard that so many times in the recent generations. It's a saying that was said many, many years ago, and I don't know if many people repeat it anymore. But we need to get back to modesty being a virtue, and efficiency and being frugal being virtues. And because all of those things are what empower us to be benevolent and to be a blessing to the world around us. It's when we can be a blessing to the world around us that we can create things that transcend the limits of our own short lives. Thank you so much for watching. I hope some of the things I've said have been helpful to you. And now may you be blessed in the pursuit of your own dreams and in all your dealings with the diversity of humanity around you. Amen. I fell by the road where the ground was too hard. I knew only trouble and pain. I tried to begin, but there was no way in. On bird's wings I left once again. Seeds in the wind carried where life begins, to places where each can survive. To reach for the rain and endure any pain, to stand up in light and to thrive. I fell where the earth barely covered the stones. I sprouted beets. Doggone it. This is getting frustrating. This is supposed to be an easy way to start the day.
It's okay.
I did it in rehearsal. How about doing it on a recording? I fell by the road where the ground was too hard. I knew only trouble and pain. I tried to begin, but there was no way in. On bird's wings I left once again. Seeds in the wind carried where life begins, to places where each can survive. To reach for the rain and endure any pain, to stand up in light and to thrive. I fell where the earth barely covered the stones. I sprouted and smiled at the sun. But my roots were too weak, and the future was bleak, until all was withered and done. Seeds in the wind carried where life begins, to places where each can survive. To reach for the rain and endure any pain, to stand up in light and to thrive. I fell where the weeds quickly covered the land. I fought to maintain my own space. I struggled and strained, but could not withstand, denied even showing my face. Seeds in the wind carried where life begins, to places where each can survive. To reach for the rain and endure any pain, to stand up in light and to thrive. I fell where the soil was healthy and deep. I extended below and above. My flower at last could unfold in the breeze, a beautiful symbol of love. Seeds in the wind carried where life begins, to places where each can survive. To reach for the rain and endure any pain, to stand up in light and to thrive.